After I finished Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, while gathering info about the developers, I noticed they made another game before The Fall of Avalon, Tainted Grail Conquest. That discovery meant that I had to jump into the game, because the lore and the setting from the previous one is something that I really liked and enjoyed. So what is this game all about? According to the description on the Steam page, Conquest is a unique, infinitely replayable story-driven hybrid between a deck-building roguelite and an RPG game. Explore the ever-changing maps, fight with deadly enemies, and learn what happened to the cursed island of Avalon. As far as descriptions go, this is really awesome. It immediately attracted my attention. However, I noticed something here, which is deck-building roguelite. I'm not much of a card or roguelike person to begin with, and the only card game I was playing was Hearthstone, but I was willing to give it a go. So that's pretty much what this video is all about. Is the game any good, and would I recommend it? Before I start, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel because it helps a lot. Thank you. Right, let's get started. Story-wise, Conquest threads a grim, lore-heavy narrative through its core gameplay. It's not about saving the world in the heroic sense, it's about surviving a world that's already been lost. If you have already played The Fall of Avalon, you will feel these story threads, so to speak, so you would basically feel at home. If not, it's going to be an amazing experience as far as I'm concerned, so in both cases, it's basically a win. You wake up to find your village empty, and this goat-like person-creature thing tells you that a cursed fog has driven most people in their land insane and transformed them. Even though there is a character creator, you don't play a predefined avatar with a scripted destiny. Instead, your character is someone thrust into the world's collapse, struggling against the weirdness and the monsters it spawns. The story unfolds gradually and indirectly, so to speak. You have text bits and lore fragments found during exploration, dialogues and camp interactions between runs, environmental storytelling present in the map regions, and NPC encounters with consequences that reshape your inner narrative. I would say this is a deliberate piecemeal, because instead of giving you a clear story path from start to finish, Conquest lets you stitch together the lore yourself. That makes the whole world feel larger and more lived in, but also more oppressive. It's almost like you're uncovering a mystery that doesn't want to be solved. Also, there's no traditional ending cinematic or triumphant resolve that wipes away the corruption forever. Every run you make ends without fully cleansing Avalon. The story reflects that because it's cyclical and existential rather than heroic and linear. So in that sense, if you like this type of a story, it's gonna be great. If not, it's going to feel a bit vague, so to speak, and you would kinda have to focus on things more because at the end of the day, it might be a bit messy. However, as far as I'm concerned, it was okay, so I'm pretty much satisfied how things are working story-wise in this game. The soundtrack doesn't feel like a serious or epic theme song. It's atmospheric, subdued, and purposely minimalistic. Instead of uplifting melodies, you get slow, droning motifs that linger just below the threshold of tension. At times, the music almost fades into silence, and that specific absence becomes part of the experience. It makes every moment feel like breath held too long. When talking about combat sounds, in Conquest, it's basically functional and impactful without being flashy. Every card you play, every strike, every damage number has an audio cue that feels weighted. Swords clang with a tangible metallic heft. Arrows whistle with just enough presence to feel lived in, and magic feels otherworldly and eerie rather than flashy or bright. The world hums with subtle sounds that often go unnoticed until they disappear like wind gusting across desolate plains, creature calls in distant darkness, and the low rumble of unseen forces beneath your feet. No matter how many times I experienced these repeat runs, I could always feel the atmosphere, which is generated by this particular sound design. Finally, voice acting in Conquest isn't constant, but when it appears, it actually adds weight. Characters speak with depth, often weary, sometimes desperate, rarely optimistic, and it complements the written narrative. NPC lines, event reactions, and story fragments blend into the world's voice, adding personality without overwhelming the gameplay. One thing that I need to add here is that the game isn't fully voiced, like your usual RPG, but what is voiced sounds pretty damn good. Overall, everything tickled my brain in right ways, so I'm pretty satisfied. Not to mention, I recognize the tunes from The Fall of Avalon, so it's even better because it just reminded me when I was playing that game how awesome it is. Gameplay is what I'm interested the most, and that's what most of this video is going to be dedicated about. When you start the game after creating your character, you are introduced to your village. It serves like a hub where you can either interact with NPCs you have recruited or rescued, enhance passive and active elements of your build, and purchase various items or services that can help you during your so-called attempts at beating the game. Beyond the village, you have a map that is split in 4 parts, 3 parts being fully fleshed out where you can fight monsters, experience random encounters and all that good stuff. While the 4th map is basically reserved for endgame boss run, so to speak, so there's not a lot in that particular area except for this one guy, basically. Once you finish a part of the map, that's about it. You cannot go back, so be mindful that you do everything there because getting experience is very important, but also finding those random encounters that can give you all kinds of stuff. Now, when you're talking about combat, in Conquest, everything begins and ends with combat because it is the main aspect of the game. At its core, Conquest takes the familiar deck building foundation and layers it with just enough RPG DNA to make it feel heavier, more deliberate, more punishing, and to a certain degree, a bit savage. You see, every fight is a puzzle. You're not just reacting turn by turn, you're thinking ahead, calculating damage breakpoints, managing armor, setting up synergies 2 or 3 turns in advance. And when your deck starts to come together, when the pieces actually click the way you want them to click, it feels incredibly satisfying. What really elevates the gameplay is how distinct the classes feel. There is total 9 of them, but you only have 1 available at start. However, as you play, you will eventually unlock all of them. So I reckon in that sense, you need to do a bit of grinding to actually get where you want in terms of having all the classes available. But it doesn't happen that slow. Actually, as far as I'm concerned, it took me a reasonable amount of time to unlock everything and to pretty much try every class that I wanted to try. Now, you might think classes are, just for show or something like that, but they're not. They aren't just cosmetic variation. Each class fundamentally changes how you approach combat, in a sense that some reward slow defense and scaling, while others push you into aggressive combo setups. Some, for example, rely on stacking mechanics or incremental power growth, while others want explosive turns that wipe the board instantly. And because of that, every new run feels like a different problem to solve, rather than just a reset of the same strategy. Naturally, I tried all of them, but eventually I decided to run with Summoner class because the vibes I was getting from it agreed with me the most. It's not all about classes, mind you. There is also synergy design, and this is where Conquest works really well. Cards don't just work together, they amplify each other in ways that feels intentional. You're not just picking strong standalone cards, no. You're building engines, you're constructing a machine. For example, a card that seems mediocre early on can become absolutely broken once paired with the right items or passive bonuses. That moment when you realize your deck has crossed the line from functional to unstoppable is pure roguelike dopamine. And unlike some other deck builders that become autopilot once you scale properly, Conquest still demands attention. Enemy design forces adaptation, and certain fights can punish greed. Others test your ability to survive burst damage. You can't just mindlessly spam your best combos. You have to understand the flow of battle. And that constant pressure keeps your gameplay engaging, even dozens of hours in. In my case, I had so many runs with Summoner, and every single time, I actually have to turn on my mind in a proper manner in order to face the challenges that the game is throwing in front of me. Eventually, however, you will figure out what works best and what doesn't. But due to the roguelike element, since when you enter the map everything kinda shuffles back and forth and you don't really know what you're gonna find out, you always need to be vigilant, because one wrong move can destroy your potentially really good setup that you acquired early on. In that sense, what I really like about Conquest is that just one more run loop. Even after a failed attempt, there is this pull, this sense that the next build might be the one. You know, the one where everything aligns, the one where the synergies snowball out of control and you basically become a god. And because the systems are deep, because there are so many combinations and upgrades, it genuinely feels possible every single time. While Conquest has its flaws, and we'll get to those later, the core gameplay is not the problem. The combat system is smart, layered, and satisfying, and when it works, it doesn't just feel good. It actually feels like you earned it. And that's basically what keeps me coming back. When it comes to progression and replayability, Conquest walks a very fine line, and it can either nail it or trips over it. On paper, the game has everything you'd want in a roguelite. Multiple classes to unlock, new cards gradually entering the pool, permanent upgrades, camp expansion, passive bonuses, all that good stuff. There's always something to work toward. Like I mentioned before, even failed runs push you forward in some small way. And that can create a powerful incentive loop. Because at the end of the day, you're not restarting, you're just rebuilding to become stronger. That's why the first few hours are driven almost entirely by your curiosity. I mean, I just remember myself going, what does this class do? What happens if I invest in this card instead? What new items can I unlock? And because each class genuinely changes how combat flows, replayability feels real and not artificial. It's not about just replaying the same game with a different skin. Here, you're experimenting with new engines, new strategies, and new synergies. But the thing is, here is where it becomes a double-edged sword. For example, the same meta progression system can make early runs feel very weak, sometimes even frustrating. I know, because I've been there. Before you unlock stronger cards or passive bonuses, your character can feel underpowered. When I started playing, I could feel these early hours being grindy, almost like the game is holding me back, experiencing fun, until I invested enough time in it. And in a genre where skill is supposed to carry you forward, that can actually feel strange. There are moments where it seems like progression matters more than mastery. And because there's so much unlockable content, the pacing can also feel uneven. You might have an amazing run where everything clicks, and then all of a sudden the next few attempts feel like a step backwards because you're missing the right tools. That can particularly happen when you are trying new classes. However, the long-term progression can smooth these bumps, so to speak, and eventually make the game satisfying, but the path there isn't always smooth. At the same time, if you enjoy long-term investment, this system is addictive. The camp upgrades create a sense of permanence in a genre built around resets. There is something satisfying about slowly rebuilding your base, expanding your capabilities, and watching Avalon change bit by bit. I would even be a bit bold to say that this gives Conquest more RPG identity. So, like we discussed, progression in Conquest isn't shallow, far from it. It's layered, meaningful, and expansive. But the key ingredient here is that it demands patience. If you're a person that enjoys gradual power growth and long-term payoff, you will love it. If you, however, expect immediate balance and equal footing from the first run, you will probably bounce off. And that's why it gives you such a double-edged sword feeling, so to speak. It keeps you invested for dozens of hours, but it also can ask for commitment before it fully opens up. Every system has a weak spot, and in Conquest, the problems tend to emerge not from the core design itself, but from the way its ambition sometimes outpaces its execution. Let me explain this on a concrete examples. For starters, one of the issues I have noticed after I unlocked all the classes is balance. Or more accurately, the lack of consistent balance across classes and builds. While some classes feel sharp, versatile, and capable of adapting to any situation, others come off as clunky, situational, or hopeless without specific cards or items. You can easily notice that if you Google things like best class in Conquest or something along the lines, you will see a common theme. For example, it seems that warrior classes are kinda the worst, while mage-like classes are much better and more powerful, not to mention more versatile. I reckon that's one of the reasons why I'm sticking with the summoner class, because at the end of the day, we humans always stick to stuff that actually works for us and that we enjoy. Unless you're some kind of a masochist or something like that, I don't know. But that's basically the reality of situation. And what this means is that your success often feels less like a reward for smart play and more like a product of luck. Because in Conquest, RNG doesn't just influence your runs, it pretty much defines them. If you don't draw the right cards early, or if the items you find don't synergize with your class, a run that should be winnable can quickly become an exercise in frustration. And that frustration isn't small, since repeated bad RNG can turn what should feel like a challenge into an uphill slog that doesn't feel fair. Linked to this is the pacing issue, which crops up especially over longer play sessions. In theory, a slower, methodical pace can be atmospheric and rewarding, and to be honest, it is when it actually works. But in practice, pacing sometimes crosses the line from deliberate to tedious. In that sense, combat can feel drawn out, enemies can outlast your attention span, and exploration encounters, while they are flavorful, can interrupt momentum without adding much mechanical value. The tension isn't always thrilling, sometimes it's just fatiguing. For example, quest progress depends solely on RNG. Either the quest giver or the encounter will appear, or it won't. In my case, I still have only half of the village rebuilt, so to speak, and I can't seem to find these triggers which would allow me to unlock more elements. And that is a bit silly because considering I already bested the quote-unquote end boss in the game, I should already have access to these things. Fortunately, the game explains through the lore why is this happening, so it's kinda less of a blow, but still, I would like to have my village fully operational so I can continue playing the game. One thing that I should also mention is what I call the onboarding experience. The game drops you into deep systems with very little hand-holding, and for those coming from more guided deck builders, this can be isolating. There is a learning curve, sure, like with every game, and that's okay, but there's a difference between rewarding challenge and a sense of being left to figure everything out by trial and error. Without clear explanations or card mechanics, status effects, or how certain systems interact with each other, people who are encountering this thing for the first time can feel a bit overwhelmed instead of empowered. I didn't have a lot of issues with this because I took the game as a repeatable, non-ending challenge, so I reckon that mindset kinda helped out. And not to mention I have a lot of patience as is, so again, I was okay. But not everybody is like me, and that's where the problems might appear for you. So I reckon your mileage may vary when it comes to the onboarding experience. Now, this next thing isn't a flaw as much as it is a design philosophy. Conquest doesn't offer the triumphant, clean resolution that players from other games often crave. Every run ends eventually, but not every run ends meaningfully, because there is no singular final boss moment that feels like turning the tide of Avalon's decay. Instead, progress is incremental, narrative fragments are fragmented by design, and the world remains oppressive. That particular artistic choice works for people who want existential bleakness, but for others who want a more traditional narrative arc with satisfying closure, well, for them it can feel unsatisfying. I kinda felt a bit pulled by the nose first time I reached what I thought is a final boss, only to realize that it is final boss -1, so to speak. It was a bit confusing, but then, as the description says, this is the game that is never ending. So in that sense, I re-evaluated my expectations and later it felt much better. I was able to do this, but others might not. So for some people, this might be an issue. I would like to point out that none of the issues that I mentioned before can break the game outright, but they do shape the experience in ways that are impossible to ignore. Conquest is brilliant in ideas, but there are times when its execution doesn't fully keep pace with its ambition. And because it can ask so much from you, the player, time, patience, strategic depth, and all these things together, these rough edges are felt more sharply than they might be in a simpler game. Like I said before, these problems don't ruin Conquest, but they are part of its identity, and for some folks, they might be the reason why this game wouldn't basically appeal to them. So the real question is, who is Tainted Grail Conquest actually for? If you're a type of player who loves deep deck building systems, the kind where you sit there staring at card rewards for 2 full minutes calculating synergy potential, this game will absolutely speak to you. If you enjoy building engines rather than just stacking power, if you like runs that feel earned instead of handed out, Conquest delivers that slow burn satisfaction in spades. It is also targeted for people who value atmosphere over spectacle. If you prefer oppressive dark fantasy over bright, punchy, high-energy roguelites, this world will pull you in. The tone is heavy, the pacing is deliberate, and the vibe is bleak. And for some players, that commitment to mood is exactly what makes it memorable. But there's also a flip side. If you want instant gratification, this might not be for you. If you get frustrated by RNG swings, which will test your patience, or if you expect every class to feel perfectly balanced from start, you might walk away disappointed. I would say that Conquest asks for investment. All kinds of investment, to be honest. Time investment, mental investment, emotional investment. It's a game that opens up gradually, and the more you put into it, the more it gives back. And if you expect that it's going to bend backwards to impress you in the first 2 hours, that's not going to be a thing. That's why, in my opinion, if you happen to feel that it's very grindy early on, and you feel the pacing and the weight of systems that aren't fully unlocked yet, you will probably bounce off this game early on. Meanwhile, if you stick with it, that would probably translate in maybe dozens, even hundreds of hours into refining builds, experimenting with classes, and chasing that perfect run. So in the end, I would say Tainted Grail Conquest isn't trying to compete with other fast, streamlined roguelites. It's carving out its own space, somewhere between deck building, RPG, and grim fantasy survival story. If you're looking for something methodical, oppressive, and system-heavy, this is 100% worth your time. If you want something snappy, perfectly balanced, and immediately accessible, my suggestion is that you might want to look somewhere else. Also, keep in mind that the game isn't that expensive, it's somewhere around $15 or something like that. So that is also extra incentive as far as I'm concerned to give it a go. And in my case, it was really a good experience, and I will probably play it on and off because I actually enjoy it, and hopefully you might enjoy it as well. So give it a go and see what happens. And now it's time for you to share your thoughts about the game in the comment section. Do you agree with me, or you think I'm wrong? What are your impressions about it? Remember guys, comment section is there for a reason. I read all of your comments and I'm very happy to interact there with you guys. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking it and subscribing for more discussions like this. And that's it from me, until the next one.